I have a follow-up question for you, Nicole. Just on the rules of origin, could you also elaborate a bit more on other sectors? We hear a lot about the automobiles and the textiles, but you say that, you know, basically each HS 10-digit product has a different one. So to just get some overview of what's happening in the other products, are there big changes? Is it more liberal or more flexible? And, you know, are there other big outliers that one should be aware of?
I would say most of them are not as detailed. I would say that there were some big changes in the footwear chapter, and that's again recognizing how sourcing is now done, and I think also because the footwear is not being made in the United States to the extent that it was before. So recognizing how do we make those products that aren't made here more liberal, because we're just not making them, and they're being made primarily in Vietnam. And Vietnam needs those inputs. They don't have the cows to kill the cows to make the leather to make the shoe. So they're going to have to bring that leather in from somewhere. So you got to let them bring the leather in from China. I mean, so there's some renovations in the rules there. Most of the rules, if you look at the rules of origin, there's either what we call a tariff change, meaning it goes, if a good is classified in one chapter, the inputs are in one chapter, and when you finish the product, it's in another chapter. Like if my leather, which is in one chapter, suddenly let's say it's in chapter 41, and then it goes into a shoe in chapter 64, then, or 42, it goes into a bag, a handbag. I've changed chapters, boom, I'm done. So there's a lot, that's how most of the rules are. And then sometimes you might be within the same chapter, but you've made a really big change. You know, it's not just going from peas to frozen peas. That's not going to work. But it is going to be, if you went from peas to potentially a canned soup. You've done the processing, you've pureed, you've added different minerals, you put it in a can, and now you went from peas to soup. So those are the basic types of rules. Most of the chapters are very simple. It's just there's a few. Watches are complicated, footwear is complicated, textiles and apparel are complicated, automobiles are pretty complicated. You know, once you learn those, you're good. And the problem is that because of all the different FTAs, you've got manufacturers who have set up to manufacture for the NAFTA market, manufacturers set up to manufacture for the CAFTA market, and now they're going to change and have another set of rules to manufacture for the TPP. So it's difficult for producers when you have this plethora of different opportunities, and that also impacts how you're going to source historically. So my thing is, I think there should be linkages between all of the FTAs, because you've made investments in pre-existing FTAs. So that if you've got an input that comes from one, you can use in all of them, and that's going to help a lot of our partners. I mean, a lot of the companies and a lot of our trading partners.
Can I vote moderator prerogative here? Sean, in your presentation, you addressed some of the critics on the right, on the left for ISDS. I'd like you to address the critics on the right, including those who say companies should fend for themselves, they should go find private insurance, the U.S. doesn't have an interest in elevating the rule of law in partner countries because rule of law is ours inherent advantage. So talk about some of those criticisms, if you would.
Yeah, it is interesting in investment, and there are some, it isn't a typical left-right breakdown, and people and associations have come out with interesting alliances, at least in the narrow investment issue. Look, maybe it's my background as a State Department guy for so many years, but I do think we have a national interest in raising standards of rule of law and so on like this. And the idea that we want to build a wall around our place and let the rest of the world go to hell in terms of human rights or rule of law or something, I think you do have to take a somewhat broader approach in the world in which trade and investment is going to take place. But I mean, yeah, companies can buy private insurance, but I do think it's important also to remember why ISDS, Investor-State Disputes Settlement, was created. I mean, it wasn't an American invention. It was back in the late 50s. We're coming to the end of the colonial period. It was sort of a European invention. I think the first bid agreement was between Germany and Pakistan, perhaps. But I mean, until you came up with that, it was sort of a state-to-state problem. So if an American company, you know, had been expropriated or treated badly in a foreign country, the company, the American company, would come to the American government and try to get the Secretary of State and the ambassador and so on to go out and negotiate for them. Well, that's not, I mean, that politicizes everything, and you know, the companies were having frustrations with could they get their government to do this or not, and frankly, I think if the American Secretary of State and a foreign minister or a prime minister from a country, I'd like to think they have more important things to talk about than compensation for an insurance company or something like that, about, you know, other issues going on in the world. And frankly, most foreign ministers and ambassadors are not investment experts, so do you really want them doing it? So the idea of creating this investor state was to take it out of the political realm, let it be decided by technical experts, respected arbiters in a process, and I think that basically has worked. I'm not saying they get every case right, but as I said before, governments win more cases than they lose, and so on. And the idea that companies would rush to use investor-state dispute zone, it's a last resort, particularly for the large companies. If you're a small, you know, family-owned company and this is the only investment you've got abroad, maybe you have to rush to do it. But if you're a major company, it's more important to have it out there as a point of leverage, but you want to find a solution and work it out and so on like this. So, you know, the fact that, you know, as is always cited, I didn't say it before, the U.S. has never lost a case and so on. So I think it's a system that does work. It's not perfect. Can it be improved? Has it become more transparent? Which I think, you know, even if the business community wasn't the driving force pushing for that, is a positive development and so on like that. So I think it's something that's proved its value, and for whatever reason, it's now in the political crosshairs for people who may have a broader agenda, I think, that's beyond the details of investment.